Welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. To take a look at another release from the Doctor Who Big Finish main range. This time round it is the release from the 6th Doctor 2018 trilogy, which is The Law of the Nomad, written by Matthew J Elliot. Nice to see the 6th Doctor back once again, because normally his episodes do tend to sort of appear near the end of the year, so it is nice to have a little bit of a mix up this time round. And I start off for a new 6th Doctor trilogy, where this time the 6th Doctor is pretty much having his own standalone releases, which I definitely think is something that has been well deserved for the 6th Doctor, because he's a Doctor that definitely can benefit from some stories by himself, because he's pretty much one of those Doctors that can walk into absolutely any story and wipe the floor with absolutely every cast member, because everywhere he goes he has this big massive presence. And this story, I think, to start with, is one of those episodes that is a great example of that, and I can't wait to see how it progresses in the further releases in this trilogy. Firstly, to start off, this is the May release for the 2018 line. Of course, it is now June at the time of filming this, so yes, there has been a little bit of a delay, meaning that closely following after this one will probably be the review of the next story, which I do believe is the one with Isambard Kingdom Brunel, and I've completely forgotten the name of it, that I'm just going to check now. Ironbright, that I've been incredibly looking forward to. So yeah, that is in fact the first ever story to also feature the new cover art as well, because this is the last ever Big Finish main range to actually feature the sidebar. It's been lovely having you. A little bit sad to see you go, not gonna lie, I really do love that format. It's a shame to see it leave the Jodie Whittaker logo, but hey, change happens, and it seems on a moment too soon. So yes, I said this episode is in fact the May release, and closely following after that will be the June release. Because of exams and stuff, I've had a little bit of a delay when it came to the reviews. As usual, in the description below I will be leaving the link to go and buy this release from the Big Finish website. It's currently out now. The physical CD is $14.99 and the download is $12.99. If you are interested by what I say throughout this review, then you could also go to the Big Finish website to listen to the trailer. Also get all the episode details and the cast details from there as well. Taking a look at the cast for this story now, we of course have Colin Baker as the 6th Doctor, George Sear as Matthew Sharp, Matthew Holness as Eric Drazen, Susie Riddle as Esther Brack, Ruth Sillars as Willoway, and we also have Jonathan Christie as Captain Stuma, Annie Barry as Jupiter Hartigan, and then we also have Dan March as Vargan, and other people are played by lots of different other people in the cast. So as you can see, we have some rather interesting names throughout this story. I feel like we're going to 1960s Doctor Who, making my job of reviewing this story a little bit more difficult. So yeah, thank you Matthew J Elliot for giving a rather complex cast for this story. And this episode is written, as I said, by Matthew J Elliot, and it is directed by John Ainsworth. The producer is also John Ainsworth, and it is script edited by Alan Barnes, and the executive producer is of course Jason Hake Ellery and Nicholas Briggs. And for some reason I feel incredibly shattered after saying all those cast details. Don't know why. I don't normally feel shattered from doing that, but hey, today's one of those days. As I was saying a little bit earlier, the beauty about this story, and what I presume will be the following two stories in this trilogy as well, is the 6th Doctor is kind of by himself, meaning that he basically has the whole stage to himself to do what he wants, and he is honestly one of those Doctors that really has a powerful presence, because I feel that Colin in this story very much, I think that Matthew J Elliot has written him in a brilliant way. He was correcting certain people's speech, and he was going into certain situations quite obviously where people don't like him. He also made a few friends in there as well, and I feel like this part of the 6th Doctor is one of those ones that you do quite like. I think there is definitely that ego in there that he had within the TV series that necessarily people don't like as much, but also at the same time he had a few of those likeable factors in there, and I felt that he was one of those Doctors, kind of a little bit like an uncle that you kind of warm to and enjoy, because you enjoy their presence, you enjoy their stories. And I think a similar thing that I'm seeing with different Matthew J Elliot stories is that he is bringing a certain element into his episodes of Doctor Who, where he makes Doctor Who feel like this one big universe, because there is several moments throughout the story where the Doctor goes off and reminisces about certain adventures that he's had in the past. There is also several references to different aliens and different planets that he's had adventures to, and he meets the different people throughout the story, such as he, for example, mentions Skaro, and then he also mentions the Quarks at some point as well in the early half of the story. And I feel that this is a Doctor that has gone through time, and he's gone on these adventures, and he basically desperately wants to tell all of his travels to all these different people, kind of like a older elderly person wants to say sort of about stories from their childhood. So I do really like the way that Matthew J Elliot brings those into these stories, because this is now, I do believe, the 3rd time that that has happened. I can recall it happening in the Silurian Gift, or whatever it was called, in the 7th Doctor era, where you have the 7th Doctor being very mysterious and saying about different stories in his past too. So George Sear as Matthew Matthew Sharp, the new companion, who is a rather interesting character. I think that it is very unusual to have a companion in this story that has been with the Doctor for a few adventures. You're probably on your 6th adventure with him by now, but we don't really know the way that he's been introduced to the story, because we have a few elements in the story that does have a few flashbacks to where the Doctor first met him and sort of the circumstances that he met him under. However, we don't actually have that first adventure into space, sort of the first adventure into the future, the first adventure into the past. We kind of get all that out of the way, and we just have this story that is sort of the mid-season episode where you have this relationship that is only just blossoming, and you kind of have that early part of the relationship not there, which I do quite like. It's something that is a little bit of a fresh start, and something that Big Finish does do every so often. So you do have a few loose ends there that possibly Big Finish may return to at some point. The same thing for this story as well, with this companion. I think that he's a rather nice contrast to Colin as well. He's a little bit similar to Flip in the same manner that he is kind of quite young. He's got a lot to learn, and sort of the 6th Doctor is his teacher. He wants to educate him on certain aspects of life, to the extent at some points in this story he's literally sat in the TARDIS and is showing him different TV programmes and culture and things from his past so he can learn about that. So I do really like that. He was a little bit of a fresh air in this story, and I definitely think throughout the later half as well he was a very interesting character. Other people that I'm going to briefly mention for this story as well is Matthew Holness as Eric Drazen and Susie Drizzle as Esther Brack, who is basically the main businessman of the story that has got this big massive space liner cruiser thing, and he's the main businessman of that. He's the owner, got a lot of money, and he's got this plan to basically make it into this whole hotel. And then you also have a reporter from a news corporation that is there at the same time giving this interview, who's sort of in awe about his person and kind of wanting to ask the correct questions. I think that those characters are really nice supporting characters for the story. I think I very much got used to them in the episode. However, at the same time, I thought some of them were a little bit of a caricature kind of format, especially Brack. I think that her character being the news correspondent was a little bit of a caricature of just your standard, almost American news reporter that kind of thinks she's amazing, thinks that she has to be in the limelight constantly 24/7. And then also the businessman character, who I once again forgot his name, Eric Drazen. He's kind of the arse character. I can't put it in any other way, to be honest, because he's one of those people who thinks he's amazing. He goes into every situation and says, "Hi, I'm here, I'm the best thing in the room, and I'm going to do this. This is your job, go and do this for me." However, at the end of the story, you get a little bit of justice for his character, but also not justice at the same time. You kind of feel that he has an end to cap off his character. There is something that is kind of a little bit egotistical at the same time, which I think is a nice way to put it. He was an interesting character. I definitely liked him a little bit more than Brack, because I do think that Brack, as I say, was just a little bit of a caricature and almost needed a little bit more development for me to be fully interested in her character. Also introduced to a robotic creature for this story that is also an octopus thing in kind of a cybernetic suit, and it is called the Makara. Once again, another rather complex name. Thanks, Matthew J Elliot, for that one. But yeah, I think that it's actually the character on the very front of the disc, from what I'm guessing, the cover art, and it does look rather fun, and I do also like the way also that the cover art is very bright, very reminiscent of Colin's coat. So yeah, a rather interesting character where you basically have this worker on a space station, a little bit like the Tesselector, and it's like a servant. It needs to carry out certain jobs, and something has gone wrong within its system, and it's basically been hacked, and it started to kill people. However, not all is what you expect. And what I'm going to get onto now with the actual narrative itself is basically the early half of this story. The first 2 episodes is the prime example of a Doctor Who base under siege story, and I must admit, I wasn't really very impressed by it. I didn't think it had much oomph. I didn't feel that this story was delivering in any way of a unique manner, because Matthew J Elliot written this story in the traditional Doctor Who format. However, as soon as you get to sort of the midpoint of this story, where everything starts to fall into place, you have a few timey-wimey elements where people have been trapped in time. There's also a few moments where you have people from the past, people from the future, where they've really been in this portal for a few seconds, but they've actually been in it for like 70 years or something like that. And yet you have this moment where something happens, this big revelation, and you have essentially been tricked. The listener has been tricked into believing this is a normal, nothing to see here Doctor Who based under siege story, but really that is exactly what it wants you to think. It's one of those episodes that is hiding in plain sight, as not what you expect. And I think that I definitely respect Matthew J Elliot for this story for the later half. However, at the same time, I think the first half is a burden. I do get the idea of it being one of those stories that is, let's make it sound the most average Doctor Who story ever, but at the same time, it does take a little bit of getting through. I think that Matthew J Elliot has this really unusual style where you go into his episodes thinking this is going to be another one of those classic Doctor Who mediocre Big Finish main range stories. It doesn't really have anything special to say about it. It's just one of those adventures that is in there. And I went into that with the same opinion of Zoltis. I went into that with the same opinion for the Silurian Gift. However, Matthew J Elliot has this style of making the episode sort of really nicely sit with you by the very end. On the third episode of this story, I was really looking forward to see how the episode is actually going to end, because there was a specific twist, as I've said, that I'm not actually going to mention in this review, because it's one that I didn't really see coming, which I think with some stories is something that is in fact something that you see, because with audio dramas sometimes they need to suggest elements in the characters because you don't have them visually, so you can't have certain elements of their expression on their face revealing that they have sort of a darker motive. So normally when they have a darker motive underneath, it's very obviously said in the verbal script. However, in this story we have this out of the blue moment where I thought, wow, I wasn't expecting that, and even when it did happen I was in doubt, thinking, is this actually real? Is this happening? Is this all a trick? But also at the same time, this is actually happening. And wow, I actually fell for it. And I do like that. I think that Matthew J Elliot really did actually surprise me with this one. However, that said, at the same time, I do worry a little bit for this story, because I think that we've seen this theme before with Matthew J Elliot stuff, and I worry for the future episodes that he's going to do that it's going to follow this exactly the same format, and this idea is going to end up predictable. But that said, at the same time, I do kind of feel that he is aware of that, and I think that his stories in the future are going to take an even different turn. So when you think you actually know what's going on and you can predict in advance, maybe we're going to get even more in there, and it's going to trick us even more, sort of almost a double bluff to some extent. Yeah, I think my only errors kind of with the story that I think it could be improved on for is kind of that early half. I do get the idea, as I say, that I think that this episode is one of those ones that is essentially taking the mick out of Doctor Who based on the siege stories. The Doctor answers a distress call, we end up being on this space station that has this rather odd history idea behind it of it was once a holiday liner, now it's something else, and it's sort of been going through time and it was abandoned and this businessman has took it over, and we have this rather unusual entity that has been creating certain designs for the interior stuff and making it all luxury and stuff like that. And then we have the idea of the robots and the cybernetics being took over, and Supply on the inside of the cybernetic suits kind of feeling a little bit emotional about it, because there's a few moments where they are chasing the Doctor and they say, we are truly sorry for trying to kill you, we apologise for your death. And it is rather funny and reminds me, as I say, a little bit of the Tessellactor. In fact, it's kind of a patchwork Doctor Who story with certain elements from certain episodes brought into it, but that said, at the same time creating its own identity. So far of this story sees two standout performances, one of which I'm not going to talk about because it kind of reveals the plot, and the other one being the Sixth Doctor, because we see the Sixth Doctor in this story face an issue that the Doctor is never normally confronted with. I don't think in Doctor Who history I've ever seen an episode like this that actually puts the Doctor in this situation, and you do kind of get a little bit of that helpless aspect in there. And even at the very end of this story, we have the Doctor singing, he's just in the TARDIS, and you kind of feel, is this going to be the theme that's going to continue throughout the next two stories? Is this where we're going to go with the Sixth Doctor, almost into this lull, almost like he's going for a little bit of a midlife crisis, which would kind of make sense considering he is his sixth incarnation, and we've just had the 12th Doctor who also went through like a little bit of a crisis. I think that he does look a little bit like a crisis Doctor, totally not referring to the quote whatsoever, but yeah, I think that he's one of those Doctors that can do different emotions quite well, and I've got a feeling, and I really hope I'm right with this one, that we're going to go into a more darker era of the Sixth Doctor when he's a bit more lonely, a bit more by himself, and a bit more sort of secluded in his own thoughts. And I think that possibly may be a Sixth Doctor that I will very much enjoy, because I think he could do that very well. That is why the Sixth Doctor is my favourite, because he's unpredictable, and this story actually shows that. So if you're a Sixth Doctor fan, then I do recommend this one, because it does have a few twists in there. And also, if you're a Big Finish fan that's looking for something a little bit different, then maybe I do recommend this one as well. However, as I say, those problems and issues that I had in the early half of this story, of it basically being a novelty sort of based on the Siege episode, can drag for a few parts. So I do think if you're a new listener, you may want to miss out on this one because it might not be the best first impression for a Big Finish story. So I guess that's it for this review. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I guess stay tuned for the next Sixth Doctor Big Finish main range review that will be Iron Bright in the brand new, exciting style with the Jodie Whittaker logo, and I'm very excited for that one because it's written by Chris Chapman. It's a historical episode, I think, with a few alien aspects in there, but we've got Isambard Kingdom Brew now, and I think it's the Thames Tunnel or something like that, or something in London, and I've not really looked into the story that much, but I can't wait to listen to that one because I think I just have a good feeling about it because it's historic, and I think it's going to be one of those episodes that really makes me get excited inside. But yeah, that's that for this review. I guess I'll see you all in another Doctor Who review at some point in the near future. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now.